The very first clinical shift I did in this hospital, my shift was meant to start at 9:30 at night, but the junior doctor's medical handover was 8:30, so I came along to introduce myself and see what was going on the handover. And a lady had just arrived back in the hospital. She'd been on a bit of a trip. Actually, she'd been perfectly well during the pregnancy, and she'd given birth. And then shortly afterwards, within a few minutes, she'd got really horrible central chest pain, to such an extent that people were really worried there was something seriously wrong. So she had her family and a new baby sitting right there, and there she was with this horrible pain. And all of our initial tests, we couldn't really tell what the problem was. And so the only thing for it was to put her in an ambulance, send her across the city it was actually to the Royal, to get some special images of her chest and her heart, which we couldn't do here, and to see a specialist over there and to see whether she was going to be safe to stay at the Women's or whether she'd have to be shipped off, for example, to the coronary care unit across in the Royal. And the upshot of it was that, in fact, the tests were negative and she was fine. Her symptoms resolved and she was then able to come back to be with her baby and the family. Well, actually, she'd missed the first few hours of her baby's life because she'd been across the other side of the city centre finding out whether she had a serious medical problem or not. And we couldn't have sat on her here and said, no, we'll just ignore those symptoms, because what if things had been seriously wrong? What if she had deteriorated? That wouldn't have been a good place to be. So those sorts of things, they don't necessarily make the headlines, but that involved a few hours of her life at a crucial moment when she'd just given birth, 2 ambulance journeys and a bunch of imaging that we couldn't do on site here, and specialist advice that we couldn't provide on site here. It was really obvious to me. That was the very, very first case that was discussed with me when I came on to my very first shift here. In places I've worked before, that simply wouldn't have happened. Somebody would have walked down the corridor with those specialist skills, assessed her on site. Yeah, she might have been away from her baby for half an hour, getting some imaging done, but that would have been it. Really, really quite a different experience for her and for the rest of her family.